Thank you for joining us today. My name is Janaína Goulart. I'm a communicator at the IDB. To achieve net zero emissions by 2050, the region needs investments of $180 billion annually. However, the region receives less than 4% of the worldwide investments for climate change and social development. So more resources are needed. And to talk about solutions to this challenge, we have here today Avinash Persaud, the IDB's Special Advisor on Climate Change. Thank you for joining us, Avinash. Welcome.
Thank you.
Avinash, I'd like to start with, let's get started by the public investment, the public side of the story. What can governments do to increase investments to face climate change?
Well, you mentioned a very large amount of money the region needs to get to net zero. But of course, climate finance is even more than that, because in addition to being net zero, we also need to make our economies resilient, to adapt to the changing climate. The climate change is already baked into the system. And then we need money for loss and damage too. So how do we organize all of that money? We need, because governments will drown in debt if what they do is they borrow all of that money. So we need to divide up the money needed into things the private sector can do, things that only governments can do, and things that governments need grants from outside to help. So break it down into revenues, into savings, and into costs. And we think the government should focus on those things which, if it builds adaptation and resilience, savings, it can pay back the debt. So our role at the IDB is to provide loans at low cost so they can accelerate, governments can accelerate the amount of resilience and adaptation they do.
That's awesome. And talking about the private sector, how can governments, what can governments do to engage and partner with the private sector to boost green finance and green investments?
So about 2/3 to almost 3/4 of all the climate finance we need is related to things that have a revenue attached to it. Solar farms make money, hydroelectric power stations, wind turbines. So we need to get the private sector doing that so the governments can keep their ammunition for other things. But the reality is the private sector is not coming. It's going to rich countries. It's financing the green transformation in America and Europe and other places, but not in Latin America and the Caribbean. So how do we catalyze? How do we mobilize that private finance? And we've been doing a lot of work here at the IDB on what are the obstacles. And one of the main obstacles is the cost of hedging, the foreign exchange risk. And the foreign exchange risk captures all kinds of risks together into foreign exchange. It's not just foreign exchange, it's also credit and political and currency risks. How do we reduce those risks? And we've just launched a new platform with Brazil where we can help projects, renewable energy projects, borrow money from abroad without having to hedge, because other people have taken the risk, absorbed the risk, and manage the risk. And that's what we need to do to mobilize and catalyze the funding we need, because at the moment, the private sector isn't coming.
No, this is awesome, and especially because it's an innovation, right? So how is a part of the FX Edge? How is the IDB working with the governments to boost green investments through innovative financial instruments? Can you tell us a little about this innovative financial instruments?
Well, there's no magic. And indeed, the sort of hope that there will be some magical technology or some magical financial instrument is, if anything, holding back us doing what we need to do. We have all the technology we need the money. So we have been using not magic, but deep knowledge of the problem and coming up with solutions. So the problem we find in mobilizing the private sector is, how do we deal with the risk? How do we put the risk that the private sector doesn't want to have, how do we put that risk in the right places? So we are working on the projects holding some of the risk, the risk they can manage? They can manage through raising their prices. How do we put some of the risk onto governments, where governments can manage because they are managing macro stability? And how do we take some of the risk ourselves as the IDB that governments can't manage very well? The risks of volatility in the international capital markets. We, with our AAA rated status, can manage that risk. So putting the risk in the right places allows us to lower the cost of hedging and unblock the flow of private money.
This is very innovative and can be an example for lots of other countries in the region and outside the region, right?
Well, we're starting with Brazil, but the real goal, the prize, would be to use the lessons and the implementation in Brazil to really broaden this out to across the region, and not just the region. We want to partner with the African Development Bank, the Asian Development Bank, and make this a global solution because, of course, we share one global climate.
That's amazing. And how do you see, how can IDB really contribute to impact green finance in the region? Above all the examples that you just said, how do you see that the IDB can contribute to real impact for green finance and finance investments?
Well, we want to be the impact bank, the innovation bank. And that means not only making sure that we have enough resources and capital for us to lend, but they're also mobilizing and catalyzing other people's money. One of the innovations we're working on, called IDB Klima, is where we lend money to a government, say for creating adaptation and resilience. And if they achieve the resilience, other people provide some money to give a reward to the government to lower the interest rate. If the government's convinced they can do it, they can borrow even more money knowing they'll get the reward, and we can double the amount of impact we can have.
That's amazing. Avinash, thank you so much for your time. And if you want to learn more about climate finance, I hope you enjoy our social media channels and you can find more information there. Thank you for joining us.